It's Hard to Believe, the podcast that brings you absolutely true but very hard to believe stories. I'm your host, G Wiz. Now let's get into it. Blood rain. Imagine stepping outside only to see everything coated in red and blood raining down out of the sky. Well, that's exactly what happened in 2001 when blood-colored rain fell over Kerala in southern India for 2 whole months. It even dyed their clothes pink. As you can imagine, this was extremely unsettling to the people of that region. As they grew more and more alarmed, the government wanted answers. A report was quickly published blaming dust from an exploding meteor. Evidence to the contrary emerged, so that report was retracted a few days later. Then the government released a new report blaming prolific local algae. It's hard to believe, but some people just didn't trust the government's report. A physicist in that region, Godfrey Lewis of Cochin University of Science and Technology, became interested in the phenomena and began collecting samples of the liquid for himself. What he expected to find was sand, dust, algae, or pollen that had simply mixed with normal clouds and created the spooky red rain, like the report said. But what he saw under the microscope would bewilder him. Inside the water droplets, he could see what looked like red blood cells. The cells even lacked DNA, just like the mature red blood cells do. However, real blood cells would be destroyed easily by rainwater. 5 years later, in 2006, Dr. Lewis published his findings suggesting that the red cells could be extraterrestrial in origin. In fact, a comet had reportedly exploded in the sky above the region just before the red rain began. More and more scientists are warming up to the idea that some forms of life can survive a trip through deep space on comets or meteors. This idea, known as panspermia, is supported by an experiment that was conducted on the International Space Station. Balls of bacteria were placed outside of the space station unprotected for 3 years. When they retrieved the samples, they were stunned to find that most of the microbes had survived. Another experiment showed that if a meteor is the right size, the interior pockets will not become overheated during its descent through our atmosphere. While not yet proven, it is scientifically possible that all life on Earth has an alien origin, including you and me. Needless to say, study of these unknown red cells continued. An international team of scientists was convened, which included Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe, a leading proponent of the panspermia theory. The team discovered that while the unknown red cells did nothing at room temperature, they did something quite remarkable at 121 degrees Celsius. They reproduce. Quote, under these conditions, daughter cells appear within the original mother cells, and the number of cells in the samples increases with length of exposure to 120 degrees Celsius. We know of life forms that can survive extreme temperatures, but nothing on Earth is known to behave like this. The team also discovered that the cells fluoresce when bombarded with light, which happens to mimic the unexplained phenomena observed in a region of space called the Red Triangle, which is itself a giant red dust cloud. Despite the new evidence, the government of India stands by its algae hypothesis to this day. While scientists may have competing theories as to what these cells are, as of today, no one can say for sure. It's hard to believe, but blood is not the strangest thing to rain out of the sky. It may not be raining actual cats and dogs, but would you believe that it rained fish, frogs, and tadpoles all over the people of Ishikawa Prefecture in Japan in June of 2009? This actually happens with some frequency all over the world, and it has been recorded throughout history. It even rained golf balls once in Florida. And no, that wasn't because I was playing. I am terrible at golf. Incidents like this one are caused when waterspouts or tornadoes suck things up into the sky and drop them later, sometimes many miles away. Imagine how Alan Couch of Olympia Springs, Kentucky must have felt when he witnessed chunks of meat falling from the sky outside of his home in 1876. This meat rain was most likely the result of vulture vomit. Apparently, the large birds will sometimes regurgitate food to make themselves lighter for flying. On New Year's Eve in 2010, the folks in DB, Arkansas must have been terrified to see thousands of red-winged blackbirds falling to the ground dead. It turns out that fireworks were to blame, as they caused a multitude of the startled birds to take to flight despite being completely night-blind. The sightless birds unwittingly killed themselves by flying into trees, poles, buildings, and each other while trying to flee. If you happen to live in Australia, then prepare yourself for spider rain. Yes, I said spider rain. The frogs don't sound so bad now, do they? It's probably more accurate to describe these events as spider snowstorms. Several species of spiders around the world use a technique called ballooning to relocate to better hunting grounds. You might remember this from the ending of Charlotte's Web when all her little babies flew away and we had to wipe the tears from our eyes over a spider. The spiders climb to a high point and release thin threads of silk, like a homemade parachute, into the breeze. When thousands of spiders emerge at once, it can create a spider snowstorm. Also, at various times and places around the world, people have reported walking outside during or just after a rainstorm to find the ground covered with a mysterious jelly. The jelly eventually disappears on its own. One sample collected in Dorset, UK, turned out to be sodium polyacrylate, which is used to absorb liquids in things like diapers and potting soil. It's hard to believe, but despite knowing what it is, this unusual rain event is still unsolved because no one knows how the substance ends up in the rain and on the lawns. You can find links and more information about this topic and our complete library at our website, hardtobelieve.blog. Thank you for listening. This has been Hard to Believe. I'm your host, G Wiz, asking you to please like and subscribe for exclusive content.